Welcome back, deep divers.
Yeah.
Today, we are going to try to wrap our heads around a film that's really out there, Symbol.
Ah, symbol.
Yeah, a 2009 Japanese film, and
Yeah.
a total mind-bender.
Yeah.
If you ask me, it's a
Very much so.
absurdist comedy.
Yeah.
From the unique mind of director and star Hitoshi Matsumoto.
Ah, Matsumoto. Yeah, he's a fascinating filmmaker, definitely known for pushing the boundaries of comedy and really kind of defying easy categorization.
And Symbol really embodies that. What did you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a film that really kind of gets under your skin and stays with you. You know, you keep thinking about it long after you've seen it.
It definitely does.
Mhm.
So, Symbol, it features Matsumoto himself in the starring role, alongside a cast of some really quirky characters.
Yeah.
And the basic premise is a man trapped in a white room with buttons shaped like, well, you just kind of have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, you can't really describe it, you just have to experience it.
And somehow, a Mexican wrestler figures into all of this. So buckle up, listeners. It's going to be a wild ride as we try to unpack this cinematic puzzle.
Let's do it.
So to kick things off, why don't we start with a brief plot overview for our listeners? No spoilers, of course.
Okay, so imagine a man dressed in these brightly colored pajamas, waking up in a stark white room. There are no doors, no windows, no exits, just these smooth, featureless walls. The only things in this space are these bizarre buttons that are protruding from the walls.
The buttons are shaped like, well, let's just say they're a little unconventional.
Yeah, they are definitely not your average light switches.
And the man, he's clearly disoriented. He has no idea how he got there or what's going on.
It's a very unsettling situation, and as he starts to interact with these oddly shaped buttons, things start to get really strange really quickly.
Yeah, that's when the film really takes a turn into the surreal.
Random objects start appearing out of thin air. I mean, you see everything from a toothbrush to a vase to this runaway cart that seems to have a mind of its own.
And the man's reactions to all of this are priceless. I mean, he's like a child discovering the world for the first time, except this world is filled with, well, giant inflatable rear ends that are definitely not for sitting on. But there's also a sense that these seemingly random objects are more than just comedic props.
Right, there's definitely a deeper layer to it all.
Do you think Matsumoto is trying to comment on consumerism here? Maybe even the fleeting nature of desire?
I think that's a very valid interpretation. You know, these objects appear, they serve their brief purpose, and then they vanish.
Oof, gone. Just like that.
Just like so much of what we chase after in our own lives, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's material possessions or fleeting experiences, they come and go, and they don't really leave a lasting impact.
It's also temporary. And speaking of temporary, the man in this room is racing against the clock.
Oh yeah, there's this countdown timer.
A countdown timer that he has no control over. And this, I think, really adds to the tension and the humor of the situation.
Right. He's trying to figure out how to escape this room. He's battling this locked door. He's got this timer ticking away. And it's all just so absurd and hilarious.
And just when you think you have a grasp on what's happening, Matsumoto introduces a completely new element. A Mexican wrestler named Escargot-Man.
Yeah, where did that come from? Right.
All right. Talk about a tonal shift.
Total shift.
We're suddenly thrust into this completely different world, this world of professional wrestling. And we see Escargot-Man's family life, the pressure of his upcoming match, and you can't help but wonder how these two narratives, the man in the white room and the Mexican wrestler, how do they connect?
Well, that is where Symbol really starts to shine. It's not immediately apparent how these storylines intertwine, but as the film unfolds, we discover that the buttons in the white room directly influence events in Escargot-Man's life.
It was wild, right? Like a cosmic puppet show.
Yeah. It really makes you think about cause and effect, free will versus determinism, like, is the man in the room consciously controlling Escargot-Man's fate?
Or is he just a pawn in a larger game? Like he's just sort of randomly pushing buttons and affecting this other reality without even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's what makes Symbol so brilliant. It operates on all these different levels. It's funny, it's thought-provoking, it's visually stunning. It's really a unique cinematic experience.
It really is. And it definitely gets you thinking about some pretty big questions.
It does.
Questions about life, the universe, and everything.
The meaning of it all.
The meaning of it all, exactly. So we've got a lot more to unpack here, but first let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of our deep dive into Symbol.
Yeah, it's a trip, that's for sure. Like, he's a cosmic puppet master, but he's kind of clueless about what he's actually doing.
And that journey that the man in the white room goes on, I think that's so fascinating how he starts to understand the power of those buttons. He goes from this state of utter confusion to almost feeling godlike.
Right, and it's not just the wrestling match he's influencing. It starts to expand outward. Like, he's affecting natural phenomena, even historical moments.
Oh yeah, those visuals of him like climbing that wall of buttons and the impact is just getting bigger and bigger. It's almost like biblical.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of religious imagery at play there. And I think Matsumoto is really playing with our ideas of power and responsibility. Like, what does it actually mean to be godlike? Is it just about controlling things? Or is there a deeper moral dimension to it?
And you have to wonder, like, does this guy in the White Room, does he even understand what he's doing? I mean, he's got all this power, but he still seems like subject to fate.
Right, like he can't really escape his own destiny, even with all this control.
It's so interesting. And the ending, with him entering that final room, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was left with like a million questions. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, that final room. It's almost like a cosmic control center, right?
Mm-hmm.
With continents etched on the walls and that giant button in the center. It's
Yeah.
like he's ascended to this whole other realm, something beyond our comprehension.
And you're left wondering, like, is he actually ascending to a higher plane of existence? Or is this the final test? Like the ultimate challenge in this bizarre cosmic game?
I don't know. It's so open to interpretation. It's like Matsumoto saying, here are the pieces, you figure out how they fit together.
Right. And that's what I love about Symbol. It's not just entertainment. It makes you think, it makes you grapple with these existential questions about like existence, meaning, even the nature of reality itself.
Yeah, you can analyze it on a purely symbolic level, thinking about the White Room and those buttons and those objects, or you can approach it as like a meditation on our search for meaning in a world that often feels random and chaotic.
I think both are totally valid, and that's part of the film's genius. Like, it allows for all these different readings. Each viewer can bring their own experiences and perspectives to it.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we would love to hear from our listeners. What did you think of Symbol? What stood out to you? Did any particular symbols or themes resonate with you? And how did you interpret that ending? Really want to know.
Yeah, head over to our website or social media pages and let us know your thoughts. And if you haven't seen Symbol yet, we highly recommend checking it out. But fair warning, it's a trip. So, be prepared to have your mind bent a little.
But it's worth it. It's a cinematic experience unlike any other.
So while you're pondering those deeper meanings, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the film's more technical aspects. The visuals in this film, they're so striking, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The way Matsumoto uses color, the starkness of that White Room contrasted with the vibrancy of the outside world, it's like he's creating this sense of both claustrophobia and wonder at the same time.
It's masterful. And the music and sound design plays such a huge role in building the film's atmosphere.
Yeah, the soundtrack, it shifts between these like quirky electronic tunes and then more traditional orchestral pieces, mirroring the film's kind of fluctuating tone.
And the sound effects, especially the ones associated with those buttons and those bizarre objects, they're so hilarious. They add this whole other layer of absurdity to it all.
Yeah, and it never feels forced, right? Like the sound design is always supporting the comedy and the themes without ever taking away from the deeper meaning of the film.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the good stuff. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk pros and cons. What are some of Symbol's biggest strengths, in your opinion?
Well, I think its originality is undeniable. I mean, this is a film that really defies easy categorization. It's a blend of comedy, fantasy, philosophy, and it's all done in a way that feels so fresh and daring. And it's also incredibly thought-provoking. It sparks these really interesting conversations about everything from consumerism to free will.
I completely agree. It's a film that just stays with you. It makes you want to go back and rewatch it, reinterpret things, and talk about it with other people. And for me, the visual style, I mean, it's just so stunning and symbolic. Each frame is like a carefully composed painting. And of course, the humor. I mean, this film had me laughing out loud, both at the physical comedy and just the sheer absurdity of the situations.
Yeah, the humor is great. It never feels cheap or mean-spirited. It's just born out of the characters and the bizarre situations they find themselves in.
So those are some definite pros. Now, are there any cons? Are there aspects of the film that some viewers might find challenging?
Well, I think the ambiguity might not appeal to everyone. If you prefer narratives with clear-cut answers, you might find Symbol a bit frustrating. It really demands that the viewer participate in the meaning-making process.
And it's not exactly a fast-paced, action-packed film. The pacing is a bit slow, especially in the first half. But I think that slow burn actually adds to the film's mystique,
Definitely, yeah.
lets the tension build gradually.
Definitely. And the payoff is worth it. It culminates in a truly mind-bending climax.
So overall, would you say the pros outweigh the cons? Would you recommend Symbol to our listeners?
Without a doubt. It's a cinematic gem, a film that challenges conventions and pushes boundaries. Anyone with an appreciation for absurdist humor, visual storytelling, thought-provoking cinema, I think they'll find something to love in Symbol.
I completely agree. It's a film that demands to be seen, discussed, and revisited. It's not your typical movie-going experience, but that's what makes it so special.
Yeah, it reminds us that cinema can be more than just entertainment. It can be art, it can be philosophy, and it can be a mirror reflecting our own search for meaning in a world that can often feel chaotic and absurd.
Beautifully said. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into Symbol, I want to shift our focus to Hitoshi Matsumoto himself. I mean, you're the film buff here, so can you tell us a bit about his background, his style, and where Symbol fits into his larger body of work?
Well, Matsumoto is a true auteur. He's multi-talented,
Yeah.
a comedian, writer, director, actor. He's had a huge impact on Japanese entertainment. He started out in comedy, actually, with a duo called Downtown that became incredibly popular in Japan back in the 80s and 90s. But his artistic ambitions kind of went beyond stand-up. He started writing, directing, acting in films and television, and he quickly gained recognition for his unique style.
So Symbol isn't his first film then?
Oh, no, not at all. He's directed a number of films, each showcasing his distinct blend of absurdist humor, surreal imagery, often with a touch of the grotesque. I mean, some of his notable works include Big Man Japan, which is a mockumentary about a superhero who grows to these enormous sizes. And then there's R100, which is so bizarre it's almost impossible to describe.
He sounds like he's not afraid to take risks and really push the boundaries of what's acceptable.
Yeah, he's a true iconoclast. And Symbol, while it's probably his most accessible film, it definitely shares DNA with his earlier work. You see that same dark humor, the fascination with the absurd, the willingness to really challenge audience expectations.
So for our listener who might be new to Matsumoto's work, would you say Symbol is a good place to start?
Absolutely. It showcases his comedic sensibilities while also tackling these deeper philosophical themes. If you enjoy Symbol, you'll definitely want to explore his other films, but be warned, they can get pretty out there.
Now, for our listener who might be new to Japanese cinema in general, what would you say are some of its defining characteristics? What makes it unique compared to, say, Hollywood cinema?
Well, Japanese cinema has this rich history dating back to the early 20th century. It's known for its visual storytelling, its exploration of complex themes, and its willingness to experiment with genre and form. There's often a certain poetic sensibility to Japanese films, a focus on mood and atmosphere that often sets them apart.
I've always been struck by the attention to detail in Japanese films, both in the visuals and the storytelling. There's this sense of precision, almost like each frame is a carefully constructed painting.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And there's often a sense of restraint, a focus on subtlety and nuance that can be quite different from Western filmmaking. Japanese cinema can be so powerful in its quiet moments, It lets the audience draw their own conclusions.
But it can also be incredibly bold and visually stunning when it wants to be. Like, think of films like Akira with its groundbreaking animation, or Ran with its epic scope and just raw emotion.
Absolutely. There's a real sense of fearlessness in Japanese cinema, a willingness to push boundaries and explore unconventional narratives, and that's what makes it so exciting.
So for our listener who might be hesitant to venture outside their usual film choices, what would you say to encourage them to give Japanese cinema a try?
I'd say be open to new experiences. Be willing to embrace different storytelling techniques. And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Japanese cinema offers a world of cinematic treasures waiting to be discovered.
Who knows, you might even fall in love with a whole new way of experiencing film.
Now, as we come to the end of our deep dive into Symbol, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. If life itself is a series of buttons we're constantly pushing, what kind of reality are you creating with your choices?
Whoa, that's heavy. It really makes you think about how our choices shape our reality.
It does. It connects the film's themes of chance, control, all of that, to our own lives in such a direct way.
Yeah, Symbol makes us look at the choices we make, big or small, and think about the ripple effects they have. Not just on us, but on everyone around us.
Exactly.
It's like even the tiniest actions can have huge consequences, kind of like that guy in the White Room pushing buttons with no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think the film wants us to feel overwhelmed by that idea, you know?
No, not at all.
If anything, it feels hopeful. Like, even with all the chaos and the randomness, we still have the power to create our own meaning, to shape our own destinies.
Right. And it reminds us how important it is to be present, to be aware of the choices we're making, rather than just reacting to whatever life throws at us.
Okay, so here's a question for our listeners. If you found yourself in that white room, what would you do? What button would you push? What kind of reality would you create?
Good question.
Let us know your thoughts. And remember, there are no wrong answers when it comes to symbol. What you get out of it depends on you, your experiences, your beliefs. It's all subjective.
Absolutely. That's what makes discussing films like this so interesting, right? Everyone brings something different to the table, and those different perspectives can lead to some really fascinating insight.
Exactly. It's like a Rorschach test for movie lovers. What do you see in those images? What does that tell you about yourself? So if you've seen Symbol, we want to hear from you.
Definitely.
What resonated with you? What questions did it raise? Head over to our website, our social media pages. Let's have a discussion. And for those of you who haven't seen Symbol yet, we highly recommend adding it to your watch list.
It's a film that will stick with you, make you think about the world, your choices, your place in it all.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I gotta ask one last question,
Oh.
just for fun. If you were trapped in that white room, what random object would you want to appear? I'm gonna go first. I think I'd want an endless supply of coffee. Gotta keep the energy up for these deep dives.
Good choice. I think I'd go for a comfy hammock. All that button pushing and reality bending would be exhausting. Plus, it'd be a nice contrast to the starkness of that white room.
Oh, I can picture it now. You swaying gently in a hammock, pondering the mysteries of the universe.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, we should probably let our listeners get back to their day. But before you go, we want to leave you with one final thought from Symbol.
Okay, hit it, split it.
If life itself is a series of buttons we're constantly pushing, what kind of reality are you creating? Think about it.
Wow. That's a great question to end on. Thanks for joining us.